I'd like to turn it over to our program director to introduce the program.
Hi, that's me. I'm Deb Gibson. I'm the program director for Channel City Camera Club. And by an act of serendipity, Satie and I share a mutual friend, and I was hiking with a mutual friend one day, and we were commenting on the wildflowers and the birds, and she happened to mention she had this friend who had taken this amazing trip to Peru and was also a photographer, gave me her Instagram account. I looked at all her images, and I know that she had just given a presentation to the Audubon Society. And because we have a special interest group of members that love to do bird photography, I thought this would be an amazing fit. So we connected, and if you haven't read Satie's bio in the angle, I'll just kind of tell you a little bit, and then I'll let her tell you about the trip they took in 2019. But Satie is a California native, born in Los Angeles, raised in the Sierra foothills, and has been living in Santa Barbara since 1999. She has been the Assistant Dean of the Bren School of Environmental Science and Management at the University of California, Santa Barbara since 2011. She received her PhD in ecology from the University of Chicago in 1999 and her bachelor's from Humboldt State University in 1993. So Satie, I will let you tell everybody about this amazing journey that you took, and to introduce your colleagues from the 4 continents. And again, I'm so happy for the connection and that you were able to. I know you've had an incredibly busy schedule having to teach on Zoom, and I'm just so happy that you were able to squeeze us in.
Well, thank you so much, Deb. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you tonight. Can you see my screen? I've just shared that. Fantastic. I want to thank the Channel City Camera Club for your interest in my trip and my bird photography in Peru. Today, I'm going to talk about the amazing bird diversity in Peru, and from the high Puna grasslands to the lowland Amazon forest. And the photos that I'll share today were taken on an expedition that we took with 4 amazing birders in May 2019. I'm going to share photos both from myself and from several of our group members, and I'll introduce you to our group very soon. There we go. Whoops, find the next slide. There we go. Okay. I find inspiration in nature, in seeing beautiful landscapes, in breathing fresh air, and looking and listening to learn something new and to remember the important things in life. When I'm able, I travel to the most incredible forests of the world to observe and photograph wild animals and plants. And I share my photos and stories to inspire, educate, and motivate people. Now more than ever, it's important to instill a sense of belonging and stewardship in people so we care for and nurture the natural world that sustains us. I feel an urgency to explore and document the wild places that are increasingly threatened by human activities. Each year, the forests shrink under pressures of logging, agriculture, mining, oil and gas extraction, and other economic drivers. And each year, some species become increasingly rare and some become extinct. This is a picture of me and my husband, Jeff, at Manu Wildlife Center in Peru in 2019. And together, we have traveled around the world. We think we counted up over dinner 26 countries in the last 20 years. And we look for the most interesting and elusive animals and plants around the world. Jeff is a cycad expert. Cycads are plants that sort of look like palms, ancient plants. And he has a specialty nursery in Santa Barbara called Aloes in Wonderland. Check it out if you love plants. And he's also an eco tour guide. He takes tours around southern Mexico and mostly looking at plants, but also looking at birds occasionally. He's a hardcore international birder, and he's observed over 5,000 species in the wild, and that puts him in the top 215. He's the 215th ranked birder in the world. So quite a resume for Jeff. And of all the places in the world, we feel very lucky to live in Santa Barbara, but we love to explore. And in 2007, we traveled to Uganda to do a birding trip, and we met Alfred Twinamojuni. Alfred is one of the most talented birders that we had ever met. It was awesome to be birding with him in the field. In 2017, we traveled to Bhutan and we met Dorji. Dorji actually is on the line with us tonight. He is one of the most amazing birders. Not only does he know birds, but he also understands plants and the ecology and the relationships between them. In 2018, we traveled to Brazil and met Rafael Santos, and Rafa impressed us tremendously. His knowledge of birds and bird calls and ecology across the South American continent is unbelievable. And we had the amazing concept, the idea, the dream to bring together these very talented birders and take them on a once-in-a-lifetime trip where we would go to Peru, highlighted here with the yellow star, and look at birds. We've chose Peru because it has a staggering array of bird species. We got the group together in May of 2019. And in Peru, we chose a route from southern Peru over the Andes and down into the Amazon forest. The reason the biodiversity is so high in that area is because you have so many different kinds of habitats. In fact, the route we chose is known as the birdiest road in the world, the birdiest area in the world. Jeff and I went there in 1999, and we wanted to repeat that trip for a long time. And it was such a privilege to take with us these amazing birders. So let me introduce you to them. Alfred Twinamojuni is from Uganda. He's a top birding guide there. And he started as a ranger working with mountain gorillas in windy, impenetrable forest. He's got an unbelievably sharp eye. He can see through trees and through leaves at anything. He's got a keen ear and an incredible versatile whistle. He can imitate almost anything. And Alfred has managed his own birding company, Avian Watch Uganda, for the last 25 years. Dorji is a birding guide and forest ranger based out of Bhutan, and he's an incredible birder. He's got a great knowledge of plants and birds, and he's also a superb photographer. He is the president of the Asian Wildlife Photography Club since March 2019, and he was selected as the best nature photographer of the year for his country of Bhutan. He represented Bhutan at international photographic competitions in China, and I'm so excited that Dorji is on this call today with us tonight, calling in from Bhutan, where it is 8 a.m. on October 21st. So thank you for being here, Dorji. Our next participant was Rafael Santos, or Rafa as his familiar name. And Rafa is a biologist and wildlife photographer based in southern Brazil. He is hoping to call in tonight, but he is in the field in southern Brazil somewhere, and he would call in from his cell phone if he does. So I'm not sure if he's on the line at this time. He also manages an environmental consulting company, and he's an incredible wildlife photographer himself. I have pulled together the best photos from Dorji, Rafa, and myself into this presentation. So before we get started on the photographs themselves, I want to talk a little bit about gear. The most important thing before going out into the field is to assemble a set of incredible gear that's not too heavy. For me, the most important thing I have to take is my pair of Zeiss 1042 binoculars. Those are absolutely essential to do birding in the field, actually to do pretty much anything in the field. I could travel anywhere as long as I have those binoculars. I want to keep my camera gear light as possible. So there's a trade-off between precision and power and weight. And so I've found over the last 20 years, I've found the right balance for me. And so what I prefer, I have a Canon EOS 7D Mark II with a 100 to 400 millimeter image stabilizing lens. It's heavy. The kit there weighs about 5.5 pounds, and carrying that all day and holding it up to photograph is a lot of weight, but it's totally worth it because this is such a great powerhouse of a camera. On this trip, I also took a second camera. So I had my old Canon EOS 6D with a 28 to 105 millimeter lens because I was also doing photography of the forest and the people on the trip, and I needed something else handy. So I carried that throughout the day and took a flash along with me. Usually I carry about 20 to 25 pounds of gear in the field, and we go all day. So we want to make sure that the gear is just right. My traveling companions also consider their gear very carefully. Hafa and I shoot the same camera, and we enjoy comparing notes and settings. He also carries a lot of other gear. He's a birding guide, and he usually carries a digital recorder, a microphone, and he carries a scope and a tripod, an amplifier for playback. He carries a lot of gear in the field. And Dorji was carrying a Nikon D500 with a 200 to 500 millimeter lens. I was jealous because Dorji had a lot more power there in that lens, but the lens is just too heavy for me to carry through all day in the field. I was impressed. Dorji carried that camera everywhere with us in Peru, and he has tremendous photos because of his investment. So let's get to the journey. We went to southern Peru and the area highlighted in the red box, and this is a map of our route. We started in Cusco, highlighted by the yellow star, and we moved west through the Urubamba Valley by train to Aguas Calientes, where we had the opportunity to see Machu Picchu. We then reversed our direction, came back to the east, and traveled along the very high Andes through the Urubamba Valley, and then turned north to cross the Andes. Our highest points were around close to 15,000 feet. We went down the eastern escarpment of the Andes, all the way through cloud forest and hill forest, and then down into the lowland Amazon forest. At a certain point, there are no more roads because it's very difficult to navigate through huge river drainages with a lot of forest. So the road ends and we got on a boat and we went into the interior following the trajectories of the rivers. We followed the Madre de Dios River from past Pantiacoya Lodge, down through Manu District, and over to Manu Wildlife Center in the upper right-hand corner. And we closed the loop after 3 weeks, traveling from Boca, Colorado in the White Star area, back by taxi, by ferry, by boat, and by van all the way to Cusco. Our trip was about 3 weeks, and this was our incredible route. The first stop was Machu Picchu, as I said, and there's no road that goes from Cusco to Machu Picchu. It's a very rough canyon. And so we took a train that follows the Urubamba River to Aguas Calientes at an elevation of around 6,690 feet. And from here, you can have an incredible opportunity for birding in the areas around Machu Picchu. If you walk from Aguas Calientes 1,000 feet up to Machu Picchu, you've got incredible forest to bird. So we did that. And here, let's get started with the bird photography. So here's a picture of a collared Inca. This was one of the beautiful birds that we saw as we were walking from Aguas Calientes up to Machu Picchu. It was a beautiful, soft light. This bird was just perched on the side of the road, very easy situation. It's a gorgeous bird, a beautiful hummingbird. This is the Omisa subspecies of collared Inca and has a beautiful rufous chest patch. Others in this species have a white chest patch, but this one has this gorgeous rufous color. It's important to know where to find these birds, and so we often study maps of bird species before we go and make our itinerary. And so you can see this map of Peru shows the distribution of collared Inca in the blue shaded area. And what you can see is this species is narrowly distributed along a band of the eastern Andes, of the Andes, between about 6,000 and 10,000 feet. And it's primarily found in this humid montane forest. This subspecies is found generally around the area of Cusco and south to Bolivia. So it's important to set your itinerary to know what you're going to see and to be able to look for those species. Of course, when we see a species like this, all the photographers in the group are going crazy, right? This is a photo I took, but right next to me, there was Dorji with his 500mm lens on his Nikon camera, and he got some amazing shots, great light. He pushed the ISO up a little bit, he pushed the shutter speed up a little bit, and got some more light on that subject and some beautiful, beautiful detail. And on the other side of me, there was Hafa shooting the same bird with a little bit of a different perspective, and he pushed up the ISO and shutter speed to try to bring in some light because he didn't have that on the breast of the bird. But it's amazing to see, you know, the same experience from 3 different perspectives. I'm not going to show 3 pictures of birds for every single one that we have, but I thought it was interesting to be able to compare the three main photographers for this show. Here's a wonderful photo that Georgie took of a blue-necked tanager. I wanted to mention specifically when we go out and we look for wild birds and start to think about how to shoot them with the camera. One rule of thumb is that we want to go with some settings that we think are going to probably work in the situation. And a really good set of manual settings are to keep the ISO around 640, keep the shutter speed around 1/100th of a second or 1/200th of a second, and keep that F number down at 5.6. And that's what you're seeing right here with this blue-necked tanager. It's a pretty good setting to begin with, and what you have to do then in the specific situation is adjust up or down depending on the conditions. Here's another photo that Georgie took of a speckle-faced parrot, and you can see gorgeous detail on this bird. He pushed up the ISO a little bit, pushed up the shutter speed, trying to bring a little bit more light onto this bird, and I think the results are really spectacular. Here, I wanted to point out something really important, and that is for bird photography, the most important thing is to get the eye in focus. And here we've got a sharp eye and we've got beautiful natural light in that eye. And it really brings the photo to life. I often will use center spot focus when I'm going out to shoot birds because you never know where the bird's going to be. You always want to know where your focal point is so that you can get it as quickly as possible onto that eye. I never would use multi-area focus because then it's going to be picking up vegetation in the area. It's going to focus on something else. So you definitely want that sharp spot focus. But not all birds have the eye in the center of where you want to shoot. And so, for example, this tiger heron, fasciated tiger heron, has its eye a little bit up and to the left of center. And so if you have time, you may want to move around where your focal point is. What I find is it's a little risky to try to do that before you get a couple of shots. So I just shoot with my settings that I've got going. I shoot with my center spot focus right on that bird, get about 5 or 10 photos. And then once I know the bird is going to stick around, then I can refine where I'm going to go with my focus. and maybe refine a little bit more about that, uh, the 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 actual choice that I'm making with what that photo looks like. I think one of the most fun things about bird photography is just enjoying the beauty of the birds. This is an Andean motmot, and the color is just exquisite. The shape of the bird is exquisite. You see that red eye and this gorgeous teal and blue and pistachio color. It's just an amazing bird. This bird sits pretty still up in the mid canopy under the highest canopy, and the only thing you'll see is the tail wagging back and forth like the pendulum of a grandfather clock. It's really wonderful to watch the bird, and of course it's just lucky then if you get a few good photographs. As we were going up the hill to Machu Picchu, we had a wonderful experience with blue-banded toucanet. This bird flew in to this perch and was very curious and very active for quite a long period. We sat with this bird for maybe 20 to 30 minutes, and it's so memorable. We were able to really enjoy the bird from all angles, and the bird was so curious. We were able to catch different angles of the bird and look at the way the color patterns were distributed and try to find the right settings for this. It was really a wonderful opportunity. And not far away from the bird, just behind us, was another curious streak-necked flycatcher. And here the bird was checking us out, looking around, seeing what was going on. When you've got a couple of birds in the area, you want to take advantage of it. So you might be shooting 2 or 3 different species at the same time if they're all in one area. Most often, birds are not this confiding, and these birds were out there just exposing themselves, showing themselves for us to see and photograph. And most birds are actually hidden pretty far into the bushes. They may be flitting around behind leaves, behind branches, and it's really hard to see them. Some flashes of red tipped us off that there was a versicolored barbet in the area. Hoffa took this photo as the bird was moving around through the vegetation. And what I want to point out is it is really, really hard to get a good photo of a bird moving in the forest like this. It's a beautiful bird, and we're just so excited to be able to see it. You've got that shocking red on the head with the blue offset with yellow. It's amazing. But it's in low light, it's in dense vegetation, and it's moving fast. And it's super, super hard to photograph. It's moving too fast to do manual focus. You've got to go on autofocus and your spot focus. There's uneven light. It keeps moving back and forth between shade and super bright light. So because it's mostly under the canopy, we want to bring down the shutter speed, raise up the ISO. But if the bird's moving, we don't want the shutter speed too slow. So there's a constant juggling of the settings. I got a lucky clear shot here. The bird popped out for just a split second, and I had the shutter speed down quite low because he was in dark areas before. And unfortunately, it was a little too low, but I didn't have time to move any of the settings. You just shoot. When the bird is there, sometimes you just have this tiny window and you just have to go for it. You just try. So the bird strategy is to hide. And our strategy is to find the gaps in the vegetation where we can photograph the bird. And so in order to get a clear shot, we constantly need to be moving around. Here's a masked fruit eater, an amazing bird it's endemic to Peru, only occurs in Peru. And it was tucked up into the vegetation. Impossible to get a good clear shot. From Hoffa's perspective, he had very low light. He had a lot of leaves and branches in the way. He tried to move up the shutter speed, move up the ISO a little bit to try to get a clear shot, and he did a wonderful job of getting that bird's eye and face in focus. from my perspective, I had a little more sunlight on the bird, but I had the stick in the way. And so the important thing there is to try to get that stick as far out of the face as possible. So keep it out of the eye, keep it out of the bill area, and try to make it as unobtrusive as possible. So here you're just moving your head around or moving your body around in order to be able to photograph these birds. I did want to show again the distribution of this bird. Here's a map of Peru with the distribution shown in blue. Cusco is highlighted with the red star. And it's narrowly distributed. This is the only place in the world where you can see this amazing bird. It's generally in the eastern Andes from about 5,200 feet to about 8,000 feet, and that humid montane forest that we have around Machu Picchu. You never know what you're going to see in the forest. And at one point we came upon 2 spectacled bears. We were birding along the tracks, the train tracks, and we found these bears. We were so excited. Spectacled bear is super rare in Peru, and it only occurs along the eastern escarpment of the Andes, here shown in red in this map of South America. And we were just so excited that we thought this was a wild animal. Well, it turned out it was not wild, that these were animals that were in captivity in a large enclosure. They were being fed by a hotel, and they were a tourist attraction. And it was disappointing to find that out, but we appreciated the beauty of the animals nevertheless. And we always hope that we're going to be able to see one of these incredible animals in the wild at some point. So after hiking up 1,000 feet, we had the reward of seeing the amazing city of Machu Picchu. On this particular day, there were very, very few people, and that is almost unheard of at this point. The day before we had come in, and the day prior to this, there was a strike on the train tracks, and no trains were passing either way in and out of the valley. So there were no tourists coming in on that day. In addition, it rained in the afternoon, and so it cleared out all the tourists, and we had the city of Machu Picchu to ourselves, basically. It was just the 5 of us and our guide for the most part. Machu Picchu was constructed in 1450 for an Inca emperor, but it was abandoned very quickly within 100 years and rediscovered in 1911 by Hiram Bingham, and then declared a World Heritage Site in 1983. It's absolutely an incredible place, great place for all types of photography. The city is constructed out of rock. It's cut to precise dimensions and placed with no mortar. You can see these incredible walls that are constructed in that manner. It's a remarkable achievement of architecture and such a great opportunity for spectacular photography. But that's not what we were doing in Peru. We enjoyed it, but we were there to see birds. So we continued our journey up into the very high Andes, and here we reached Abramalaga. This was one of our highest points on our trip, an elevation of over 14,000 feet. Here is Dorji in the middle, proudly displaying the Bhutan flag. And I want to reiterate for those who've just joined, one of our team members, Pup Dorji, is on the phone today from Bhutan. So welcome, Dorji. And remember this amazing moment. Behind us were mountains going up to almost 19,000 feet. And we were in this area, this very, very special area, for a particular reason. There are bird species that occur nowhere else in the world. For example, here's a white-tufted sunbeam. This species is endemic to Peru. It only occurs there, nowhere else, and it is near threatened. This species has a tiny range. Here's the map of Peru showing the range in blue, Cusco in the red star. The range of this species is just 320 square miles total. That's it. So you really need to know where to find this species, and you need to be in the right habitat. So You know, when you see a species like this, that was new for me, new for my life list, a bird I had not seen before, there's a tension. First, you want to look through your binoculars because you want to enjoy and observe the beauty of the bird. But second, you want to get your camera and you want to start shooting. And what I've learned by juggling this between these two competing goals is that it's so important to take the time to just look at the bird with the binoculars for a few moments. It's absolutely exhilarating, and that the memory of the detail of that bird is going to be burned into your mind for your lifetime. If you pick up your camera too early, you're going to lose that opportunity. And sometimes you're not going to get the photo if the bird flies off. So you've lost the opportunity to see the bird and you've lost the opportunity to photograph it. So over years of disappointment, I have learned always pick up the binoculars first, look and absorb everything you can before you start shooting with the camera. And sometimes that means that you're not going to get a photo, but you are going to have an amazing memory. I want to show this photo of Rufous antpitta to illustrate another set of challenges we have with birding. So this is a super skulker. This bird hides in the bushes and it's very hard to see. This particular one was, we were watching it in the early morning, so the light was low, it was tucked into a bush, it was very dense vegetation, and it was foggy. We heard the bird calling, we couldn't see it for a long time, and once we finally located it, it was in a really tough place to get a photograph. So one thing that happens when you've got this much vegetation in the way is that you probably have to shift to manual focus. You can't have the camera autofocus when there's too much vegetation that's going to distract the camera. So you might shift to manual focus. With the low light, you're going to shift to a lower shutter speed and higher ISO. And so that's what these are photos from both Dorji and Hafa. And you can see that they've tried that technique to get a clear shot of this bird. You know, this is an amazing shot for both of them. It's really the best you can do in this situation. You know, it's not a flashy photograph, but I think it's one of the most satisfying kinds of photography because it's an authentic shot of a species that's hard to see in its natural habitat. We continued up into the mountains to look for a particular species in this area, Synclodes aricoma, that is very, very rare. It's actually critically endangered. There are only 250 individuals left in the population. That's it worldwide. And so super, super endangered species. And the reason it's endangered, it's associated with this specific habitat of Polylepis, this shrubby habitat. And the Polylepis is some of the only tree-like vegetation that grows at this high altitude. So the people have used Polylepis for building or for firewood or for other purposes, and they've cleared out a lot of the Polylepis forest. There's very little remaining. I would say this is a big patch of Polylepis, and you can see it all in one photograph, unfortunately. And so we spent a morning here looking for Royal Syncloides, and you can see the bird is distributed in just a few little patches where the appropriate habitat is available in this high altitude of the Andes. It's beautiful habitat, incredibly soft mossy ground cover, and then the Polylepis coming out of that. It's a little dark, so I was running with a bit high ISO trying to anticipate what we might find. And then of course, when we did finally see the bird, it popped out of the forest and into the sunlight. So you never know where it's going to be. Here's Royal Synclodes, not a super flashy bird, but this is one of about 250 individuals left in the world. That's it. And so what a privilege it was for us to be able to see this bird, this critically endangered bird species, on our trip. It was moving through the grasses and moving pretty fast. And so it moved up and off to the left side and up into the trees. I did not have time to reset my camera settings. And in this moment, you've got a critically endangered species in front of you. You're just going to shoot. You're just going to do whatever you can to get that image. And I felt very lucky that I was able to get something out of it. There are other species of synclodes that occur in similar habitats. For example, here's another one, cream-winged synclodes, a similar species, but look at the bill. So here's the royal synclodes. Look at that heavy bill. And here's the cream-winged synclodes, very delicate bill, but similar markings. This one is not so critically endangered, and it's more widely distributed in its habitat. There are lots of other cool animals up here. And of course, as photographers, we're shooting anything that we can see and find. This is a vizcacha. It is a rodent, and this one is found in central and southern Andes. It looks like a rabbit a little bit, but it's not. It's a rodent. And it eats lichens, so I think it's pretty happy up on there on that rock. You can see that it has a tail actually that flips up a little bit. That's quite different from your regular rabbit. Another species that we saw a lot of actually were llamas. Llamas are domesticated, of course, but they are very common up in this area, and they're used most often for their wool, for packing, sometimes for meat. They're ubiquitous in this area of the high Andes. So we continued our journey along the high Andes, through the Urubamba Valley and over to Huacarpay Lake, a very well-known birding area. And we turned north from here, and we began our descent down the eastern escarpment of the Andes toward the lowland forest. And we crossed over the Andes, coming into Manu National Park here at an elevation of over 11,000 feet. And I want to just explain a little bit about Manu National Park. It was established in 1973, and it's an incredible place. It was designated as a biosphere reserve shortly after that, a World Heritage Site in 1987, and recently has been described as the most diverse place on Earth in 2016. And it's diverse because it's a huge piece of land that encompasses a huge elevational gradient from over about 12,000 feet down to 800 feet. And that includes high Andes all the way down to lowland forest. And so you can see here a piece of Manu Park with a road cutting through pristine forest all the way down. The road is, the Manu Road, it's called, is from Cusco to Atalaya. It's not that long. It's 135 miles, but it drops this huge elevational gradient. And then the park continues lower than that down into the Amazon rainforest. So we started our journey at the top and we moved down through it. And in the top is cloud forest and some very, very interesting species. Masked flower piercer here, beautiful little flower piercer with a hooked bill so that it can actually cut into the base of flowers and pull out the nectar. It eats fruits and nectar and insects. And hummingbirds are very common in the area as well. It's not a brilliant shot that I took, but I did want to show the color of the gorget on this beautiful amethyst-throated sun angel. On our route, we had the possibility of seeing 78 different species of hummingbird. And on our trip in 3 weeks, we saw 44 different species, including this sun angel. Dorji had a great opportunity to take a wonderful photo of this sun angel, but the light was a little different. So you're, again, not seeing the gorget in its full color, but what a spectacular photo by Dorji. Another spectacular photo by Dorji. This is golden collared tanager, and tanagers are one of the interesting groups where we were birding. We had the possibility of seeing over 100 tanagers on our trip, and we saw 63 different species out of that group in our 3 weeks. This one, you can see some of the characteristics are just beautifully colored, bright colors, often yellows and blue, that beautiful orange color with the red eye. An amazing, amazing bird. And here's a different group. This is a mountain tanager, hooded mountain tanager, but also beautifully colored. Here I'm faced with one of the major problems in forest birding photography, and that is we've got mottled light. So the bird's head is going to be a little bit brighter, its body is going to be in the shadow, and that's really, really common when you're photographing birds. And so it's a constant trade-off, constant challenge. One of the hardest things, here's a black-throated toady tyrant just thrown in for fun. But one of the hardest things I was going to say is finding the birds. When we're forest birding, there's a lot of dense vegetation, and here's our group looking up to the location where there was an ant pitta calling. An ant pitta is a ground bird that hops around on the forest floor, and we were looking for this skulking bird, but super hard to see. We listened and looked for a long time, and we're not really successful in finding it in this location. We found it in another location, but it's so tough because that skulker is going to be hiding in the vegetation, and in order to be able to see it, you really need to slow your body down. You need to blend in with the landscape. You need to tune into the sounds and listen for where the bird is. You need to detect little tiny movements of the vegetation. You can't be speaking with your group. You've just got to be mostly silent, no fast movements. Otherwise, you're never going to see the bird. So you've got to slow that body down. But at the same time, your mind has to be totally on, because you need to be looking for a gap in the vegetation. You need to be thinking, where's that bird? You need to be alert and ready to photograph and ready to change the settings. So here is what we were able to do with this bird. It's a red and white ant pitta. Here's a photo that Hoffa took, and from his perspective, a tiny gap in the vegetation. He got a beautiful shot of the eye in focus, beautiful throat feathers also sharply in focus. It was so exciting to be able to see this. We were all thrilled, but I have to say Dorji was pretty disappointed that we call this a red and white ant pitta. He was thinking of something much redder than this when he read the name. But anyway, there it is. We had to trade positions. The photographers had to trade positions because there was only one place to be able to take a photo of this bird. And Hoffa moved out of the way. I got in position, but I'm a little shorter. And so unfortunately, the stick that was just below the bird's head from Hoffa's view was right in the middle of the bird's face for me. And so, this is just the disadvantage. You just try. There's nothing you can do except enjoy the observation and just keep shooting. It's still a lot of fun. This is one of my favorite birds that we saw. It's not uncommon. It's a beautiful grass green tanager, named for the color, and just spectacular with the beautiful rusty color, orange legs and bill, and that incredible vibrant green. And here the bird's moving around a lot. I was able to get a little natural light in the eye and get that photo. You do have the option of doing a high-speed shooting, but I don't always love that, because when you're high-speed shooting, if you're not totally in focus and you don't have all your settings right, you're just going to get a lot of photos that are not that good. And so you have to really be paying attention to the settings. And so sometimes I just do single shot, and then you can refocus every single time. But you can choose between the two, just depending on what the situation is. Here's a great photo of a slate-throated redstart from Dorji. And I had to throw this in because I love the patterns. This is torrent duck, male on the left, white and black, and female on the right. It dwells on the rivers and forages in those torrents, and therefore the name torrent duck. You probably know birders get up very early because the birds are active early. And so we were up often at 4:30 most of the time on this trip, and out in the field by 5 or 5:30 before light. And this day, we were excited to go to the location where there's a breeding area for a really special bird, Andean cock of the rock. And this was Dorji's one of his top birds on his target list. And this area is a place where the cock of the rock males come together to congregate, and they call and display for females in an area called a lek, L-E-K. For photography, this is a tough situation because we're starting before light. There is no light. It's super dark. But digital cameras are pretty amazing, and they're able to capture a lot of light through increased ISO. My Canon camera captures up to 16,000 ISO and brings in a lot of light. The photo can be grainier, which is a drawback, but at the same time, I say a grainy photo is better than no photo of a beautiful bird. So, ideally you'd be shooting around 640 ISO, but I would not be afraid to go higher if you got a situation. And again, I don't like using flash because flash will scare the bird. It will cause the bird to move in different ways than it normally would. And it also puts an unnatural light into the eye. Dorji, whoops. Oh, that is what we were listening for. And this is one of the photos that Rafael took as the light was just beginning to break, and he got a photo of this incredible Andean cock of the rock. He did push up the ISO to 2000 there, and he's brought the shutter speed way down. He was probably shooting with his camera on the railing or possibly on a tripod. But I just decided I was going to go for a lot more light, and I put the ISO way up to 12,000, and just to pull in that beautiful bright light on the bird and get that true orange color, which it's a lot of fun. It's such a rewarding thing to see these birds. They're gorgeous. The female is a lot different from the male. There's the female, and we found her a little bit later on during the middle of the day, so it was an easier opportunity to photograph her. Also very beautiful with her blue eye. This is a Mastrogan, Dorji photo on the left there, and I was shooting from a different angle on the right. Here's a very common situation in the forest. You've got a bird in the middle of the canopy, and there's a lot of light behind it up in the sky. It's midday, and the bird is in shadow because it's under the trees. So you just have to play around with the ISO and the shutter speed and see what you can do. I always check the back of my camera after about 5 to 10 photos. You don't want to be just shooting photos that are going to be throwaways. So I check after about 5 or 10 to see if I've got everything right, the focus, the settings, everything. And if it's not right, then I can adjust, and I'm not so disappointed once I look at them later on. But once your settings are right, you just get to keep shooting. Here's a gorgeous golden-headed quetzal that we came across, very camouflaged in its background. And this bird has a beautiful red breast, but it's not showing that to us, and I think it knows that. Here's a gorgeous photo from Hoffa of that same bird. And we tried and tried to get a picture, of course, of the other side of the bird, but it was not willing to share that until it flew far across the river. And here Dorji and Hoffa are trying to get a good shot, but it was so far away. What they're looking at is this. They've got the golden-headed quetzal, and you can see just a peek of that beautiful red belly and the gorgeous green feathers. But I asked the whole team, did anyone get a good photo of this? And unfortunately, the answer was no. It was just too far away. We'll have to go back. Here's a gorgeous rufous-booted racquet-tail. It's a hummingbird, but it's got a very descriptive name. Here you're seeing the racquet tail. That's the tail with the 2 spatulas on the end. And Hoffa took a beautiful photo from the side. You can see such great detail in that feather. And you've got the rufous boots on this rufous-booted racquet tail visible. What a wonderful photo that is. In this mid-elevation forest, this is around Cock of the Rock Lodge. There's Andean guan, Here's a shot of that, Andean guan, and speckled chachalaca, and a very colorful bird, golden olive woodpecker, beautiful, beautiful bird. And finally, we reached the end of the road. And so from here, we had to take a boat. From the little town of Atalaya here, we hired a boat and we traveled downstream to continue our journey into the lowland Amazon forest. Here's our boat and our boat drivers, and Georgie and Jeff. And our first stop was Amazonia Lodge at an elevation of about 1,650 feet. Still, it's lowland forest, but it's still at the high end of that. And now we're off the beaten path. There are no vehicles out here, so our luggage was transported by wheelbarrow. And in this area, we see some amazing birds, beginning to see some of that lowland Amazon forest birding. Hoatzin is one of these unique birds associated primarily with water. And so Hoatzin is the only species in its genus and in its family. So we call it monotypic in the family. Its genus name, Opisthocomus, means wearing long hair behind. And you can see the long hair behind coming off of this bird. It's fascinating. The young of these birds have claws on 2 digits of their wing when they're born. They are very primitive animals, almost reminiscent of dinosaurs. Seeing some of these lowland birds is really exciting. Here's a masked crimson tanager. The colors are just so incredibly beautiful. And here's an amazing shot from Dorji of that bird. At the lodge, they had a hummingbird feeder, and so we could see some hummingbirds coming into that. Here's a Gould's jewel front, a beautiful hummingbird from the area, and an incredible photo by Dorji of a white-necked Jacobin, another one of the hummingbirds in the area. And here, again, we're dealing with lowland rainforest. This is very dense stuff, and you're walking through the forest and you're basically seeing this, leaves and big trees, huge trees, beautiful trees. And the birding is tough. The birds are calling around, but you can't always see them. And so we listen a lot. And so, here we were listening to an Amazonian ant pitta calling. And we spent a good 30 minutes to 40 minutes trying to see the bird. It was very hard to see. And we're trying to find a way in to find this bird. You're just so excited, it's there, it's not happening, and you've got to find the gap in the vegetation. We finally found it, and there Dorji and Hafa listening to that bird and photographing it. Here's the ant pitta, 2 shots from the same position, and tough conditions. It's in the dark basically, so I've got a high ISO and a pretty low shutter speed, and you're just hoping for the best and trying to keep as still as possible. We moved down the river and down to Paniacoya, which is another lodge along the Madre de Dios River. Here's the dock for Paniacoya, very simple place, gorgeous lodge out in the middle of nowhere, certainly off the grid, although they do have a generator, so that can help. But when I'm out in a place like this, what I'm thinking is I might be off the grid for about 5 to 6 days. So what I'm doing is taking at least 5 fully charged lithium-ion batteries with me and making sure all my camera gear is charged up. If you can charge up on the generator, you want to do that every night. Otherwise, you may run out of juice. This area is so incredible for the forest. Beautiful trees are in the area. Huge strangler figs and other incredible trees. This is our group. That's just one tree. They're spanning across all of the guys together in the root structures of one tree. And gorgeous small mammals in the area: Purus red howler, brown mantled tamarin, black-capped squirrel monkey, black-headed night monkey. We're not just photographing birds, whatever is there. Amazing animals. It rains a lot in the rainforest, so we're in our rubber boots there, and the trail is just basically a little creek. But here we're listening into the forest for the animals that we might be able to see and hear. Pavane cuckoo, beautiful photo by Dorji. Here's a squirrel cuckoo, a shot I took. And amazing things. Dorji is a wizard at getting photos of birds that are hidden and moving fast and hard to see. This was a scaly-breasted wren. And here's another Amazonian antpitta. You can see just by the feeling of this image, this bird is embedded in a dark forest, and Dorji has pulled out enough light to get a great shot of that. I just wanted to mention the iPhone is a really handy tool also. We use it all the time because it has birding applications where you can see pictures of the birds, you can have the call, you can have the map and the description. And so we actually use the digital camera to take a shot, and then we compare the digital photo to the iPhone images, and then we can really get an identification on the species that we don't know. Here's bluish fronted jacamar. I wanted to say they use that beautiful bill for catching butterflies and moths. That's an interesting one. And here, this channel-billed toucan, a vulnerable species, uses that amazing bill for eating fruits and seeds. And here are blue-headed parrots and southern mealy Amazons eating clay from a clay lick. They actually use the minerals from the clay to help with digestion of their leaf diet. So we continued moving down the river to Manu Wildlife Center, which was the last stop on our journey. And this is some of the most amazing forest that we experienced on our trip. And we spent another 5 days in this area. Beautiful, huge trees in this area. And because of the huge trees, we're able to actually access the canopy through canopy tree platforms, canopy platforms. And so you erect, the lodges erect these structures, and you can go up to the top, and you can then have the bird's eye view. Here we are at the top of the canopy platform, and you can be up here in the early morning or late afternoon watching the birds as they go about their behavior in the canopy. This poor bird has a boring name called dull-capped attila, but it's gorgeous, just an amazing bird, very active and fun to watch from eye level in the canopy. Here's another bird up in the canopy, black-fronted nunbird, the photo by Dorji, and a mastityra, odd-looking bird here. Cinnamon-throated wood creeper and another long-billed wood creeper, just a crazy looking animal, very, very beautiful creature, way up in the canopy. Blue-crowned trogon, the trogons go up there too. Here's a female on the left and a male on the right of the blue-crowned trogon. And here's black-tailed trogon, male from the back and from the front. People in this area also want to photograph the scarlet macaw. That is not up in the canopy always. It can be, but when we were photographing it, it was down on the ground because the lodge is feeding them. People want to photograph this beautiful bird, and so the lodge attracts it by feeding them corn. We have mixed feelings about that. It's not great to feed these wild birds, but it is important to maintain tourism to protect them, and people love to photograph them. They are gorgeous, absolutely beautiful birds. Oh, I just threw this in, a picture of a sun bittern, an amazing bird displaying there, taking a little bit of a sand bath. I wanted to say one word about antbirds. Antbirds are some of my favorite birds. They're not showy. They're little brown, black birds with little dots on the wing, but they have the coolest behavior. Many antbirds follow army ant swarms through the forest, and they catch the insects that flush up from the forest floor, and the antbirds will eat the insects. So they have a lot of special adaptations to that. They tend to perch on limbs that are vertical, and they tend to have really strong leg muscles. Some of them have actually bare patches around the eye. This is black spotted bear eye, a photo from Dorji. Very hard bird to photograph. I did not get a single shot of this, but the bird was moving around a lot in low light, and it's amazing that Dorji pulled this off. It really helps with the Canon system to have image stabilizing. That's something we use a lot because we're not shooting with a tripod. The animals are moving way too fast to be able to shoot on a tripod. Some of the birds were the ant birds we were looking for. We would listen in the forest for their calls. And so here's Haffa and Jeff listening for calls. Haffa has an amazing ear. He's been birding in the Amazon for, gosh, 17 years or so, and he knows these bird calls and is able to listen and find the birds. And so we were looking for a really special bird that was a life bird, a bird we had never seen before in the forest, called hairy-crested antbird. And we were listening for this. And Haffa did see the bird. He saw it, but we couldn't see it. It was a situation where the bird was very spooky, and it scattered and went away before we could come over and see it. So he developed a strategy and got us into the forest where the bird was, and then played the call, and we were very quiet and still, and the bird eventually did come out. I was just so thrilled to see it. All I could do was look with my binoculars, but Haffa got a couple of amazing shots considering that situation. He's got a split second in very low light to photograph the bird, and you can see he got some of that beautiful light in the eye on this hairy-crested antbird. Amazingly well done. Again, these photos are not flashy, but what you have to understand is they are really special birds that only are in particular habitats. We've gone way out of the way now on a boat way down the river, and we are finding an animal exhibiting its special behavior in the forest, and it's just such a thrill to be able to see that. I wanted to talk about one more bird that we saw, a really special bird that we saw out of a canopy. And it was the second to the last day of our trip. We were up in the canopy, and we weren't doing much serious birding at that time. We were just looking around, seeing what we could see in the last day or two. And Haffa had heard that there was a very special eagle in the area, a crested eagle. He'd heard from another guide, so he was listening for it, and he heard the sound, but he wasn't sure if he saw it or not. It wasn't very visible, and it wasn't clear what was happening. We then started to see these scarlet macaws beginning to circle and circle around the trees, and they actually were an indicator that that eagle was nearby. And you can see the eagle was actually perched in that tree under where those macaws are, and the macaws were mobbing the eagle, trying to get it to go away from the area because it poses some threat to the macaws. And the bird was so far away, and we didn't actually have our scope because we weren't planning to do any long distance birding. So in fact, at that moment, Dorji ran 1 kilometer back to the lodge, got the scope, and came back, and the bird was still there. Amazingly, it didn't go away. So there was Dorji with the scope, getting the first look at the crested eagle, a life bird for him. And it was fantastic. Meanwhile, Alfred, who, remember, has an amazing whistle. Alfred was starting to whistle the bird and imitate it. And he imitated the bird just for fun because eagles don't really respond to calls. But amazingly, his whistle was so genuine that the bird started to respond, and it started to come closer and closer. And we were beginning to, Haffa was giving me some tips on photographing the birds in flight. He's really incredible at that. And at one point, the bird just took out of a tree and dropped down and came straight toward us. We could not believe what was happening. This is an amazing bird. The wingspan is up to 6 feet. It's one of the largest of the eagles in the New World. And here this bird is coming straight to Alfred. we could not believe our eyes. And because Hafa had been coaching me along the way about settings that I might need for this bird in flight, I was ready. And I took this photo as the bird was coming in and perching in our tree. And he came right in there, beautiful late afternoon light with the bird sailing into the tree. He just stayed for a few minutes, looked at us and figured we weren't very interesting and took off. But this was one of these examples where um, it was such a magical moment. Everyone on the team contributed. Jeff and I had planned this locality, so we were in the right place. Hoffa heard the bird, Georgie got the scope, Alfred whistled the bird, everybody contributed, and we had this amazing experience. And it really feels like magic when the team contributes to a shared goal like that and everyone respects each other's talent. So in 3 weeks, we saw 538 bird species or heard them, and many of those were photographed. We were inspired by fantastic habitats and astonishing bird diversity. And the most important outcome was really the deep friendships that we formed on the journey that we'll cherish for our lifetime. And as we were leaving on the last day, as we were leaving from the rainforest and coming back into Cusco, we asked the guys, what's your next top birding destination? Where do you want to go next? We've had such a great trip. And everybody agreed. Papua New Guinea. We want to see and photograph birds of paradise. So when we can find a way to work around COVID, you will know where to find us. So with that, I want to thank you for your time and for your interest in our birding expedition in Peru, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. I'd like to remind you that there are at least three other members of our team on the line right now. Jeff is here with me in Santa Barbara. I've heard that Hafa has joined from Brazil, and Dorji is here from Bhutan. So thank you so much for your time and attention, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Oh, Satie, that was absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. And your narration and your enthusiasm and your just delight of everything that happened is just so infectious. Thank you so, so much.
It was my pleasure, Deb.
I am not one of the bird special interest group people, but I know there are some here on the program. So I hope they have questions to ask you.
Well, I would be delighted to answer any questions. And in fact, I'd love to invite my colleagues who are online to provide any thoughts or reflections that they may have from our trip. I see Dorji there, and somewhere in this team must be Hafa. There he is. Hi, Hafa. If you have anything to add, please feel free. Jeff, I know you can unmute and add your 2 cents as well.
I am unmuted.
Any words of wisdom, Jeff?
That was a brilliant show. You did a great job.
Well, thank you. It was a brilliant trip because everybody contributed so much talent and so much knowledge to it, and I learned a tremendous amount. Of the group, I was definitely the novice birder, and I just learned so much and can't wait for the next opportunity to get back out in the field.
I enjoyed the comparison of photographs from different photographers shooting the same bird. That, I think, was the highlight.
Wow, that was at the very beginning, but it is really fun.
Times.
There were several, yeah. It's really fun to do that when we've got 3 or 4 photographers in the same group shooting the same subject. You get different perspectives, and sometimes it's amazing. It just comes down to height. You know, someone's got a slightly different angle, and you know, I was on the shorter end and Hafa on the taller end, and so we always had a slightly different angle. with a different light, and you get a different reflection, say off a hummingbird's gorget or off of the feathers. And it really shows that you can't be standing still when you're a bird photographer. You need to be constantly thinking, shall I move my head from side to side, up and down, trying to get the best light, the best angle? And then, is there a better angle from which I can be standing? Sometimes you try another angle and it just totally doesn't work because you can't see the bird from there. You might anticipate that you can, but you just can't. And so you maybe lost that opportunity. Hey, Hoffa, good to see you. Hoffa's calling in on his cell phone, I think, from somewhere in southern Brazil.
He's muted.
If there's any of the club members that are interested, have questions, or anyone, either just unmute and ask or put a question in the chat.
Sati, this is Chris. I want to know how did you learn to take bird photos? Were you teaching yourself, or did you take a class?
Oh, it's such a good question, Chris. Nice to see you. Well, I have been enjoying nature my whole life, and I really started taking photos in the 90s when I was doing my graduate work, when I was shooting a film camera, and I was shooting a lot of slide film at that time. And it just was a lot of trial and error. And I never had a formal class, although I'm starting to take classes now because I want to gain some of the more refined skills. But what I recommend is actually going in the field with other birders and photographers who are actually better than you are. And I can say, Hoffa and Dorji are better photographers than I am, and I learn so much from them when I'm in the field. I'm just asking them all the time, what are you doing to solve this problem? What are you doing with the manual settings? And they are so patient and teach me and help me improve as a photographer. And I think also, like Jeff said, comparing the photos side by side is really informative. And so if you have the time to go out with a group and then start comparing photos, you can start asking people, what are they doing in this specific case? And I actually, doing this talk, when I was putting together this talk, there are 2 or 3 things that I see in the photos that I am dying to ask Dorji and Hoffa. How did you get it like that? What were you thinking in that situation? And I can't wait to ask them, because I thought that their photo came out a little better than mine in these cases. And now I'm so curious what's going on. And so I think doing photography and birding with people who have those skills is just a really, really wonderful thing to do. I recommend it. Any other thoughts, questions, feedback?
I have a question, kind of a logistics.
Yeah.
You're carrying some big equipment around. Have you found a harness or a strap or some way to lighten the load as you go up and down those ramps?
This is a really, really good point, because yes, we do. We do have a lot of different harnesses and straps. And when you're in the field for this long, you start at 4:35 in the morning and you're going almost all day with a few short breaks until because you came in on the river. So you want gear that's really comfortable to wear, and it's heavy stuff. So so I actually have, just over the years, put together different straps that I like. With my binoculars, I have a harness that actually goes over my shoulders and back, and all of us are using that at this point. You don't want any of that weight on your neck. With my camera, because I'm small, I actually can use the original Canon strap, and I use it like a sling over one shoulder and around my neck. Not many people can do that because I'm so small that I can fit in there. Most people would need another strap to be able to do that. And then in order to get the weight of the second camera off my neck, I actually attach it to my waist. So we do definitely try to bring the weight off of your neck and shoulders, especially when you're birding and you're doing a lot of observation. Your neck is up and back and you're just putting so much pressure on your neck. You don't want to have any more weight on it than it's, you know, absolutely necessary. I've sort of topped off with about 20, 25 pounds of gear that I find is about manageable for me. But let me tell you, the guys that we were birding with are carrying sometimes a lot more weight than that, especially if they're taking a tripod and a scope with them, which is essential gear for some types of birding. Not forest birding necessarily, because the forest is just too close for use of a scope. But for the birding in the grasslands and other areas, we have 2 or 3 scopes with us usually when we're out. So thank you guys for carrying all that gear.
One more question. You don't change lenses
No.
out in the jungle? or
No way. I
rainforest?
used to do that when I was when I was a young student and I didn't have enough money for multiple camera bodies. But what I've learned is that in the field, the conditions are just so, you know, they're so rough. You've got dust, you've got moisture, you've got wind, you've got leaves coming down. It just, everything is happening all the time. I don't want anything in my camera. So I now no longer take the lens off. It's possible if you want to change lenses. Occasionally I'll switch between my 28 to 105 and I'll put a 50 millimeter on that camera. In order to shoot plants and flowers, which I also love. We can have another show on plants and flowers. But I don't do that out in the field if it's windy or anything like that. I'll do that inside the hotel or inside a protected car or something like that to try to minimize the dust that you get into that lens. But it's inevitable, you know, it's going to happen if you take that lens off.
Satie, what do you use any filters on the lenses?
I just use a UV filter actually, and I don't typically use other filters. Occasionally, I will if I'm in super highlight conditions, like in the deserts. When we go to Africa, I typically take some filters that will cut out some of the light, polarizing filters. But I really like natural light and color, and so I don't actually do anything to my photos. I don't usually change any photos, say in any kind of Lightroom or other program. I like the natural color. I like what I'm getting out of the field. And so I want it really authentic. Yeah. Do you, Peter, do you use filters?
I do.
Which ones do you use and which ones do you like?
Well, I usually use UV, and then depending on the condition, I'll polarize filter.
Yep, that's a good choice. That's definitely a good choice. Dorji or Hafa, are you guys using any filters? They're really far away on 2 different continents.
Here comes George.
Not using any filter.
No filters on Dorji. Okay, yeah, he's an authentic man. Hafa, what about you? Thumbs up? Filters? No filters.
Hi, Satie. Yes, I do. I use just an UV filter and nothing else.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, all of us, I think because we're biologists at the beginning, we're really interested in the natural condition of the bird, what it looks like in the field, what it's doing in the field. We want the real color, the real image. We don't want to change it in any way. And so I think you're hearing that from all 3 photographers, that need for authenticity. And there are lots of different types of photography. You can go out and shoot birds and you can make it much more artistic. You can change colors, you can amplify colors, and it gets really interesting and creative. but you're talking to a bunch of biologists here. And I think all of us really prefer what the experience is in the wild. And that's what we want to bring to you, because it's not easy to have those experiences that we are. You know, we're working so hard to get out in the field and find birds that are extremely rare, extremely hard to find, very skulking. They sit in the bushes, you can't see them easily. And we're trying to photograph those and bring those back to share that story with you, so that you will, you know, appreciate, understand what that's like, and be able to really get a better sense of how wonderful the natural world is and how much richness is there.
Have you ever lost your images in travel?
Oh, that's a great
Sorry.
question. Nowadays, you know, it's great because we have digital cameras. We can shoot a lot. Memory cards are pretty inexpensive, relatively speaking, and we can back them up pretty quickly, either on devices in the field or onto laptops. I did not used to travel with a laptop, but now I do. I have an Apple, a little tiny 1.5 pound computer that I use in the field. So I do back up my photos from time to time. I'd love to hear though from Dorji. I know Dorji, you do a lot of photos and video in the field, and you do almost every day put them on your laptop. And Hafa, you travel with a laptop as well. What's your advice on backing up in the field?
Like all the time I used to do a backup in laptop. So because I had a very bad experience a few years back, I think it's 3-4 years ago, I lost all my stuffs in the dive. So now what I do is, like I do backup in 3 or 2 external dive, so that if I lose one, and one will be always with me.
It's good advice. Yeah, from someone who knows. The one drawback I think of taking a laptop and all the backup equipment is just it's more gear and it's more to get damaged in the field. But now that laptops are so light, I think it's worth doing. And it is good. It takes time though, and you've got to trade off. We spend most of our day actually birding and looking at birds, and so the photography is along the way as we're birding, and we don't want to miss 1 minute of daylight and opportunity to see birds. And so in the evening we're pretty dog tired, and we go for dinner, we do our bird checklist, and then we try to stretch it out to back up our photos or do whatever we're going to do. Personally, I love to write, and I write the stories of our experiences in the evening, and boy, we don't get much sleep. That's what I can tell you. Usually we're sleeping like 4 to 6 hours a day on these trips, which is not enough for me, but I can sustain it for about 3 weeks and then totally crash. But it's great. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, with Dorji coming from Bhutan and Hafa, you say, not Raphael, yeah. Hafa from Brazil.
Yep, or Raphael, it's okay.
You from the States. How did all this come to be? I mean, how did you introduce each other, or how did you meet each other, or what's the deal that made this happen?
Yeah, we actually have a fifth member of our party who's from Uganda as well, and so it's quite a group. It happened because Jeff and I have been traveling a lot all around the world to pursue our passion of birding and looking at interesting plants around the world. And over the years, we have met just some amazing people throughout our travels. We seek out people who are knowledgeable about birds and plants, but we have met some incredible birders. And in 2007, we were in Uganda, traveling with Alfred Twinimojuni, who is the owner of Avian Watch Uganda. And Alfred was such an impressive raw birding talent, like just incredible, incredible talent. And Jeff and I thought, what if we took this guy to the Amazon? He'd never been to the Amazon before, didn't know any of the birds, but I bet with his talent, he could find and see incredible things that we probably couldn't see. And so Jeff and I had this dream, we had this idea that we would love to be able to facilitate that, to bring Alfred to the Amazon. And it stuck in the back of our mind. And we, you know, it's a lot of logistics and it's expensive, and we didn't do it. And then in 2017, 10 years later, we met Dorji in Bhutan when we were traveling there with David and Patty West, who were on the call, and Dorji. And we thought, this is incredible. You know, Dorji's going to give Alfred a run for his money. Dorji's really talented, and he very much impressed us with his birding knowledge, his knowledge of ecology, especially relationships between plants and birds and the ecosystem. And we thought, wow, you know, what if we brought Dorji and Alfred to Peru or the Amazon? And then in 2018, we were sort of debating what to do about that. We met Rafa in Brazil, and he just blew us away too with his knowledge of birds and their songs, especially really, really talented with his ear and knowledgeable about the relationships. What interests us is not just the bird identification, but it's the relationship of that bird to its environment, its distribution, its evolution, its ecology. And Rafa is an expert in all of those things from around Brazil and throughout South America. And so when we got home from that trip with Rafa, we said, we've got to make this happen. And I said, okay, Jeff, we'll make it happen. You know, we're going to make this happen. And so it took us a lot of negotiation with various embassies trying to get visas for Dorji and Alfred to come into Peru. But we eventually did it, and we were able to bring the whole group together. They had not met each other before. But we brought them together in May of 2019. And what was amazing is now you've got the top birders from these countries coming together, and they can see it. They know right away the expertise that the other one brings. And there was so much respect and admiration across the group. I was a little worried about bringing together, Jeff is also a top birder from here. And I thought, well, I've got 4 alpha birders in my group. How's this going to go? And it was amazing. The energy, the ability to be able to see what we wanted to see was incredible. And we definitely want that feeling again. We're definitely going to make it happen again.
So what it all comes down to is that these guys can look at a bush and give you expert guidance when they say it is just there around.
That's Alfred. Jeff imitating Alfred. Yeah, they can see, you know, they can see, they can hear, they can find and photograph amazing things that sometimes I'll be standing there. Dorji's getting amazing photos, and I'm just standing there looking. I don't even see this bird. Where is it? It's not so easy. It's really not easy. But it is one of the most rewarding things to spend time out in the forest and to be able to learn from nature and from each other, and find this tremendous value and knowledge that is just out there for us if we accept the opportunity.
Well, Satie, you did a great job, and I think you've inspired everybody to go out and get some better bird pictures.
Right. You can do this in Santa Barbara or wherever you are. You can take your camera out tomorrow, and you can, you know, hike around your neighborhood, and we've got some amazing birds here too. So don't pass up that opportunity. And I can't wait until the next time we get to go out in the field, and I will see you in Papua New Guinea, Dorji and Rafa.
What about me?
Oh, you're coming along too, Jeff, of course. I see you today. I see you downstairs. Okay. Are there any other questions? It's 8:30. I do want to be mindful of the time. It's getting late, and I'd be happy to stay on the line, but I know people probably need to wrap it up and get ready for tomorrow's workday. I'm just so grateful that everyone had the interest to stay on and join me in this conversation. It's been an absolute delight to speak with you. And thank you so much to the Channel City Camera Club for the opportunity.